Hi there.
Greetings!
Well met.
Hey everyone, Tia here. I realized recently that it was over 15 years ago when the original PlanetSide was released, back in May of 2003. To this day, I consider it to be the best game of all time. I wanted to start a series of videos talking about the game and what made it so great. I know at this point, its time has passed, but it's important for all members of TRG, new and old, to remember where we came from and what brought us together in the first place. TRG has never been fully functional outside of a PlanetSide game, and I feel PlanetSide 2 only provided a brief glimpse of the inclusiveness that PlanetSide 1 provided. Before I continue, I want to state that this video and the videos that follow are my opinions and don't necessarily reflect those of the TRG community, even though these videos will be posted on the TRG YouTube channel. I also want to express what great respect and appreciation I have for the developers that create games, but most likely have little or no control over the direction a game or future games take. Game development, like many things in life, is driven by corporate profits rather than the desires of the gaming community. So rather than innovation, we get a different spin on the same old concept. Look at the explosion of Battle Royale games for proof of that. But enough of my rant. This is about PlanetSide, so let's get to it. The PlanetSide 1 servers were finally shut down for good on July 1st, 2016, so in order to get some content for these videos, I'll be relying on the PlanetSide 1 emulator that is currently being worked on by a handful of dedicated folks that don't want to see PlanetSide be forgotten. If you wish to jump in and check it out for yourself, a link on how to get the emulator set up will be in the description. I also couldn't get the launcher to work, so I had to use the workaround in the directions. Also note that as of this video, while you can jump in and check out the game, it is still missing a whole lot from what was in the original game before it was shut down. So if you're experiencing PlanetSide for the first time, realize you're only seeing a small piece of the puzzle, and I hope to go into detail on different aspects of the game in future videos so you might know just how deep the gameplay in PlanetSide was. A lot of people think of PlanetSide as an MMO FPS. That might be true of PlanetSide's successor, PlanetSide 2, but the original PlanetSide was actually an MMO FPS RPG that was fully player driven with no NPCs or PvE content, the only one of its kind. The RPG element of PlanetSide provides for a much deeper and inclusive experience than any other FPS has been able to provide. It was only by happenstance that I was lucky enough to experience PlanetSide in its original glory, before poorly thought out expansions ruined the game and eventually caused a mass exodus of players. So let's briefly talk a little history, how I got involved in computer gaming, and the set of circumstances that led up to me playing PlanetSide and forever being disappointed in the games that came after. Like many seasoned gamers, my first shooters were the likes of Doom and Castle Wolfenstein in the early 90s. A few years later, I played my first multiplayer shooter on Nintendo with my cousins, which was 007 GoldenEye. Then by the late 90s, I finally got into my first online shooters, which were Team Fortress, Classic, and then Counter-Strike. After that, I never gave consoles a second look except for occasions I had no internet available, so I'd play Halo with others while deployed in the Navy on the open seas, and even our captain got in on the action, wondering who that Tialian guy was that kept killing him. A couple years later, I got into Battlefield 1942, but after playing that, I couldn't fathom how shooters could get any better with the technology that was available at the time, so I was looking forward to playing a new MMO coming out called Shadowbane. As it turned out, that game ended up being a huge boring grind, and the multiplayer aspects just couldn't come together properly, so I quit after a couple months. Ironically, right about that time, I heard about PlanetSide, which had just released. Only having previously seen some screenshots, I hadn't really looked into the game in detail, but after doing so, I decided to take a chance on it. From the moment I stepped out of the spawn building in the sanctuary, I was hooked. The first thing I saw was a Galaxy, which is a transport ship that can hold 12 players plus a small vehicle with occupants. which means it can transport up to 15 players if you were playing Terran Republic since they had a 3-seat buggy. Anyway, the ship, which was being flown by a player, landed in front of me, and I watched as players ran to the ship from several directions. To my surprise, the actual hatches on the ship opened up and the players stepped inside. Then the hatches closed. It blew my mind and instantly immersed me into the game like no other game has done before or since. It's amazing what a huge impact something as simple as enter and exit animations can have on the player experience. 15 years later, the only game I know of that has brought a hint of this immersion back to life is Battlefield 1, with its vehicle enter animations, but it still lacks exit animations to say the least. PlanetSide 1 was certainly not a perfect game. There are no perfect games, just like there are no perfect people. But the game at its core was so deep and had so much potential that I could only fathom at that point that gaming could only get better. I am sad to report that over these past 15 years, I have been sorely disappointed. Not to say that there haven't been some cool games released, but for the most part, they have all been shallow at their core, being all about completing the next kill quest, daily reward, or winning another match that has zero impact on the war you were supposed to be fighting. In other words, it's been all about the destination rather than the journey. In PlanetSide, traveling between battles was part of the experience, part of the excitement working up to the climax of the battle. It wasn't about getting instant gratification, although that option was there in one form, so players could be instantly taken to an area with active fighting occurring. Well, that's all for this introduction. I hope you enjoyed and are interested in seeing the rest of the videos of this series that will go into details on different aspects of the game. Perhaps at the end of the series I can do a video on what I would like to see in a PlanetSide 3, or a similar game that another game development company can produce, if they dare.